Hello, my name is David Orr, and this video is an overview of a permit matrix. A permit matrix is where the text and conditions from an environmental permit have been copied and pasted into a spreadsheet. In this case, it's a Title V permit issued in the state of Georgia by the Georgia EPD, and these text and conditions have been pasted into column B. This copying and pasting has been done in such a way that each condition is on one row by itself, or in some cases, if the condition is complex, there may be more than one row of the spreadsheet for the condition. Once this is done, you can then filter using the spreadsheet capabilities. For instance, for keywords, using text filters, contains, you can filter for VOC as an example, and you can have all the conditions that relate to or mention the word VOC. This is helpful for searching for information in a permit, and sometimes these permits they're 40 to 60 pages, sometimes even more in some cases, and so they're big documents, and this is a way to quickly filter and find the information you're looking for. Also, in this permit matrix, column C has been added. Column C is a very important column because it allows you to filter based on source codes. This information comes from table 3.1 in the permit. Every Georgia EPD issued Title V permit has a table 3.1 for emission units. This is a listing of the source code for each emission unit, the description of the emission unit, the regulations that apply to that unit, either state or federal, and very importantly, the permit conditions that regulate that emission unit, the conditions of that permit that apply to that emission unit. Also, it lists any air pollution control devices that are used on that emission unit. This information has been put into column C in a way that allows you to filter. So you can go to filter, text filter, contains, and for instance, B2, which is boiler number 2 in this permit, and it lists all the conditions that regulate boiler number 2. So it's a very easy way and quick way to condense the permit down to just those conditions that apply to certain units. And you can do it for any of the units that have a source code in the permit. This is a very good tool to very quickly find information in your permit. Also, in this matrix, columns D through R have been added, and this is a classification of the permit conditions by type. Does the condition require an action, which is very auditable and must be done and can be very easily determined whether you're in compliance during a site inspection by the agency? Is it a monitoring condition? Is it a numeric limit of some kind? Does it require a stack test? Is it one of the reporting requirements? And these are helpful because it allows you to look at certain aspects of the permit. For instance, semi-annual reporting. If you filter by clearing the blanks, you can then look at all the conditions that apply to and describe what is required for a semi-annual report. This is a very good checklist for the person preparing the report to go through and make sure they've included everything. When you have the permit language copied and pasted row by row, column by column into the spreadsheet, you have this column C, which allows you to filter based on source code and see what conditions apply to which source codes, and then a classification of the conditions by type. It is a very good reference tool to be able to quickly find several different ways, quickly find the information you need in sometimes a very large permit. Also, once this has been done and the permit has been put into a spreadsheet in this format, you then can use the capabilities of a spreadsheet to do other important things. Like, for instance, document your compliance program on a condition by condition basis. This allows you to go through on each condition and explain, how do you comply with this condition? Is it by limiting your production? Is it by limiting the VOC content of your raw materials? Do you have a control device to limit emissions, for instance? And this is a very good way to document that, but also by doing so, that exercise is, of course, a very detailed audit effectively of your system, and it makes sure that you have a compliance method for each condition of your permit. The next column is, what is the system to ensure your compliance? Are you relying on somebody's memory to remember to do a certain inspection? Or do you have a compliance calendar to send out emails and advance notice that certain things have to be done, that a stack test has to be done in 3 months or 6 months, and it's time to prepare for it? So you need a effective compliance system to make sure you stay in compliance. What is the frequency of the task? Is it annual, monthly, weekly, one time? Monitoring devices, this is an important column because you need to understand what your monitoring devices are. Of course, continuous emission monitors are pretty clear cut that yes, they're required for permit compliance. Sometimes things like temperature indicators are not that clear in the field, at least, that they're required for compliance. So it's important to know what they are, all these instruments, have them on a preventative maintenance and recalibration program, calibration check program, and sometimes which is required by the permit. And also not required by the permit, but a good practice is to have these instruments labeled in the field. So if they're damaged, you're notified, and just in general, all the plant population knows that this is a compliance device and must be maintained properly. Who is responsible for compliance? The department and the person. And again, this is a spreadsheet, so you can add columns or delete columns, whatever you want to do that fits your facility. Column Z is a very important column, the location of files and data supporting this condition. This is very important in being a spreadsheet in this matrix. You can do it on a condition by condition basis. This is very important information, especially when there's a personnel change. If you lose an area engineer, but if there's a good transition period, hopefully they can communicate the outgoing engineer to the incoming engineer, communicate where all the files are, where the reports are. But even then, it's hard to communicate every file that's needed. Because this is on a condition by condition basis, this is a way to help make sure that every location of every file is documented. In the event that you lose an area engineer and you don't have a good transition period, this could be a lifesaver in that it could allow you to continue compliance even though you abruptly lost an area engineer. You can basically, if this column is filled out properly and filled out thoroughly, you can basically hand this spreadsheet to the incoming engineer and say, keep us in compliance. You go find the files and keep the reports being submitted on time and prepared as needed. So this can be a very important column. Also, being a spreadsheet, you can do other things. This particular matrix has columns for annual certification. It's a checklist and documentation that an annual certification, the due diligence in preparation for that has been done, so that you can go to your responsible official and show them you can sign this certification because we've done this review and we know we're in compliance. Also, this matrix has columns added for workload and cost impacts. It's important to know for something as big and complex usually as a Title V permit is how many compliance points there are, what is your risk, compliance risk, but also how much in cost in hours and dollars does it take for compliance. Compliance points are useful is that if you ever have non-compliance, it gives you an opportunity to possibly put it in perspective, a little bit in perspective. Managements will usually see the non-compliance. They may or may not see all the areas of that you're in compliance. So you can possibly communicate this is 1/10 of 1% of the overall compliance posture. Also, in order to keep your current staffing and keep your budget, this is a way to document while you go through and complete the compliance basis and these columns. You can also go and fill in, hopefully, without a whole lot of extra effort, fill in the number of compliance points and estimate the cost of compliance for each condition. So this is a way, if you choose to use it, that you can gain a lot of information and have this information available to communicate to management. Also, this matrix has tabs for tables. As we looked at earlier, table 3.1, the data is in the spreadsheet itself, but it's easier to read in a table, so therefore this tab has been added for the tables. Other sections have tables. These tables have hyperlinks back and forth so that you can see the table in its table format and go back and not lose your place. It also has tabs for the attachments to a permit. Georgia Title V permits usually have 3 attachments. Also, formulas are shown in their proper formatting whereas you can't always do that in one cell. And of course, there are hyperlinks back and forth. Compliance basis. This is added room for listing your compliance basis for conditions where it's more complex and you can fit into one cell, or there's more file locations and you can fit it into one cell. This is additional room to do that. The type of conditions, this is just definition of how the conditions were classified. This is a listing of the source codes and the descriptions as they're listed in the permit for those particular emitting units. So this is a permit matrix, and the primary aspect is once the permit language is copied and pasted, once you have additional columns to help you filter and find information, it is an excellent reference tool to better understand your permit and better get the information you need quickly from your permit. Also, once that's done, you have a framework that you can do other very important things like compliance program documentation. So if you have any questions, feel free to call me at 229-344-4743. Thank you very much.